All right, buckle up, buttercups. We're going deep today.
Into the wild world of podcasts.
Yeah, podcasts. You know those things your weird uncle listens to in his basement?
Well, they might be a little more influential than we thought.
Oh, they're influential, all right. Influential enough to maybe swing a presidential election?
That's what we're diving into today. The story of how podcasts became the unexpected kingmaker in the last election.
And the even more unexpected player in this whole thing,
Barron Trump.
the son of the former president.
Yeah.
Apparently, he was the mastermind behind his dad's whole podcast strategy.
Which is pretty wild when you think about it. I mean, Donald Trump on a podcast.
It's like watching a grizzly bear try to fit into a tutu.
Right. But hey, it worked.
Yeah.
And we're going to break down exactly how it happened.
So we've got a mountain of YouTube videos breaking down Trump's campaign. And this whisper keeps popping up. Barron Trump, the podcast prince.
It seems he was a big podcast fan himself, and he saw the potential to reach a whole new audience, an audience that traditional media just wasn't connecting with.
The youth vote, right?
Exactly. They're glued to their phones, listening to podcasts about everything from alien conspiracies to stock tips.
And apparently Barron convinced his dad to tap into that.
Which is a pretty big departure from Trump's usual playbook, right? Rallies, cable news, Twitter rants.
Yeah, not exactly the podcast crowd.
But then came the Logan Paul moment.
Logan Paul, the YouTuber, the wrestler.
The one and only Barron apparently recommended him as Trump's first podcast pit stop.
Baptism by fire much. Talk about throw him into the deep end.
It was a bold move, but it sent a message that Trump was willing to step outside his comfort zone and engage with the new audience.
And then came the big one, the Joe Rogan experience.
Arguably the most influential podcast at the time.
Joe Rogan, the guy who talks to everyone from Elon Musk to that guy who lived in the woods for 20 years.
That's the one. There was a lot of skepticism at first. People thought it was a mismatch.
Trump on Joe Rogan. It's like mixing oil and water.
But it turned out to be a stroke of genius. According to the sources we've been looking at, that Rogan appearance, along with some other appearances on podcasts popular with younger audiences, it really shifted the tide.
So podcasts, these digital dive bars where people go to hear about Bigfoot and Bitcoin, became a weapon in a presidential campaign.
It seems so. And it was a weapon wielded with surprising precision. These podcasts, often dismissed as niche entertainment, were actually key battlegrounds in the fight for young voters.
So we've got the seasoned politician taking cues from his Gen Z son about how to connect with the youth. It's like a scene from a bad political comedy, except it actually worked. But what's really interesting is the narrative that emerges about Barron himself. These videos paint him as a silent strategist, a king of the internet. Is he the political Rain Man with a knack for memes and algorithms?
There's definitely an air of mystery surrounding Barron's role in the campaign. The sources describe him as shaping the campaign's messaging to resonate with Gen Z and millennial concerns, particularly regarding the economy and what it means to be a man in today's world.
The economy and masculinity. It's like a political cocktail shaken, not stirred with a dash of existential angst.
And there's this anecdote about Barron advising his father on campaign tactics during car rides. Imagine the scene, Trump behind the wheel of a limousine Barron, riding shotguns, scrolling through memes, and dropping political wisdom like a digital oracle.
It's a surreal image, isn't it? The Apprentice meets Black Mirror. And visually the contrast is striking. One of the sources shows a side-by-side comparison of Barron in 2016 and 2024. He went from awkward teenager to a 6-foot-something giant, like he's been drinking political protein shakes.
There's a definite sense of him stepping into a more public role, even if it's behind the scenes.
Makes you wonder if he's the next Trump in line for the throne. The Prince of Podcasts, ready to inherit the digital kingdom.
It's a question worth pondering. The sources highlight Barron's growing influence and his unique understanding of younger demographics, a demographic that holds immense sway in our increasingly digital world.
And speaking of influence, we even have some commentary from Laura Trump, Donald Trump's daughter-in-law. She seems to confirm Barron's role in the campaign, almost like a proud aunt bragging about her nephew's science fair project.
Absolutely. She even suggests that Barron was the driving force behind the push for more podcast appearances, highlighting his ability to connect with people in casual settings. It's like he's the anti-politician, the guy who wins hearts and minds by talking about video games and Bitcoin.
So we've got this image of Barron Trump, the silent assassin of the digital age, a young man who might have had a bigger impact on a presidential election than anyone imagined. Who needs super PACs when you've got a podcast prince pulling the strings?
It's a fascinating story full of unexpected twists and turns. But this is just the beginning of our deep dive. We've set the stage, introduced the characters, and hinted at the drama to come. Now it's time to delve deeper into the heart of the matter. All right, so we've painted this picture of Trump the podcast pioneer. But the real question is, did it actually work?
Yeah. Did those podcast appearances actually translate into votes?
That's the million-dollar question. And the sources we're looking at, they seem to suggest that Trump's podcast strategy, it wasn't just a publicity stunt.
So we're not just talking about changing perceptions or softening his image. We're talking about swaying voters, turning those podcast downloads into actual votes.
Exactly. One video even highlighted how after the election, Dana White, the UFC guy, he directly thanked Joe Rogan for Trump's victory, like Rogan's endorsement. And the exposure Trump got on his podcast, it actually moved the needle.
Wow, so Joe Rogan accidentally became a political kingmaker while talking about elk meat and brain supplement.
It seems so. But what was it about these podcasts that resonated with young voters?
Yeah, was it just the novelty of seeing Trump in a new setting, or was there something deeper at play?
Well, I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier about authenticity and relatability. These podcasts, especially the ones hosted by guys like Joe Rogan, they're known for their unscripted conversational style.
It's like the difference between watching a scripted reality show and accidentally stumbling upon a family's home videos.
Right. Yeah, exactly. One is all polished and predictable. The other is raw and unpredictable. And sometimes that rawness, it connects with people.
It's like the difference between a carefully constructed campaign speech and a late-night conversation over a beer.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. And on podcasts, Trump was able to tap into that sense of casual intimacy. Like he was letting his guard down, speaking his mind, even if it meant saying things that would make his campaign advisors cringe.
He was weaponizing his unpredictability.
In a way, yes. Instead of trying to control the narrative, he was letting it loose, embracing the chaos.
And for a certain segment of the population, particularly younger voters who are kind of jaded by traditional politics, that kind of unapologetic authenticity could be appealing.
Absolutely. It's about rejecting the polished, focus group tested sound bites and embracing a more raw, unfiltered style of communication.
In a world where everything feels scripted and artificial, it's like a breath of fresh air, even if the air is a bit, polluted.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Okay, so the format itself played a role. But what about the message? The sources suggest that Barron Trump, he was really instrumental in shaping the campaign's messaging to make it resonate with Gen Z and millennial concerns.
Particularly around the economy and masculinity. Did Trump suddenly become a woke feminist?
Not quite. But it seems like the campaign, they recognized the need to address these issues in a way that felt relevant to younger voters.
So instead of talking about GDP growth and trade deficits, they were talking about things like student debt, job insecurity, the pressure to succeed, that feeling of being left behind.
Exactly. Issues that hit close to home for a lot of young people, regardless of their political affiliation.
They found a way to translate Trump's brand of populism into a language that younger voters could understand.
Yeah, it's like instead of make America great again, it was more like make your life great again.
A message that speaks to individual aspirations and anxieties,
rather than broad nationalistic themes. And by doing so, the campaign was able to connect with a demographic that had traditionally been skeptical of Trump's message.
It's like they built a bridge of trust with a group of voters who had previously seen Trump as out of touch and irrelevant.
Exactly. It's not just about being on the right platform. It's about delivering the right message in the right way, understanding the concerns, the aspirations, the language of your audience.
It's like political tailoring. But instead of suits, they're crafting narratives.
Precisely. And it seems that Barron Trump, with his understanding of internet culture and his finger on the pulse of younger generations, he was the master tailor in this case.
He's the political whisperer, bridging the gap between the old guard and the new generation. But this raises some interesting questions, doesn't it? If political campaigns can target and influence voters this effectively through these unconventional channels, what does that mean for the future of democracy?
That's a crucial question, and one we'll delve into in the next act. Because the story of Barron Trump and the rise of podcasts and politics, it's just one chapter in a much larger narrative about the evolving relationship between media technology and the future of democracy.
Okay, so we've seen how podcasts became this political battleground, this secret weapon in the fight for young voters. But where do we go from here?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? This isn't just about Donald Trump or the last election. This is about a fundamental shift in how we consume information, how we engage with politics.
It's like the whole political landscape is being reshaped right before our eyes.
Exactly. And we can't just sit back and be passive observers anymore.
So what do we do? How do we navigate this new world where information is coming at us from all directions, where algorithms are shaping what we see and hear?
Well, for one thing, we need to be more critical.
Yeah.
More discerning, more willing to question the narratives that are being presented to us.
We can't just take everything at face value, especially when it's coming from someone who's trying to sell us something, whether it's a product, an ideology, or a political candidate.
Exactly. We need to develop that healthy skepticism, that ability to think for ourselves.
It's like we need to become political detectives, right? Examining the evidence, following the money, separating fact from fiction.
Exactly. And that means being aware of our own biases. You know, the things that we want to believe.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in that echo chamber, especially online,
Where we're surrounded by people who already agree with us.
which can be dangerous
Yeah.
because it creates this distorted reality where everyone thinks the same way.
And the other side is just this caricature, this cartoon villain.
So how do we break out of that?
Well, it starts with being willing to engage with different perspectives, even perspectives that make us uncomfortable.
Have those tough conversations, the ones that challenge our own beliefs.
Exactly, because a healthy democracy, it depends on our ability to listen to each other, to find common ground, even when we disagree.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together, whether we like it or not.
And that the future of our democracy, it depends on our willingness to engage with each other in a meaningful way.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we leave you with this challenge. Stay curious, stay critical, and stay engaged.
The future of democracy might just depend on it.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the wild world of podcasts and politics, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us for more fascinating explorations.
We'll see you next time.
Voice